Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern and share it as the Madlik podcast on your favorite platform. This week's Torah portion is Vayishlach. An innocuous reference to a princess named Timna teaches us a profound lesson regarding accepting potential converts and how critical such a choice can be to the future of Judaism. We are oh so fortunate to be able to explore the lenient opinion of conversion in rabbinic texts with one of its leading practitioners, our very own Rabbi Adam Mintz. So join us for The Conversion Factor. Well, usually before we start, Rabbi, I ask you, how was your week? And you say, oh, it was a great week. I converted 3 people. Or it was a slow week. We had no conversions this week. But this week, I didn't ask you that in the pregame show because I wanted to focus on exactly that amazing service you are providing to our Jewish people and the model that you're setting. But we're hopefully going to get into some of the Talmudic, rabbinic, and even biblical source material that I believe in a very, very strong and powerful way supports what you're doing. So I'm going to let you do most of the talking, but I am going to tie it into the portion. And I must say that we have a faithful listener or two who was privy to these pre-game conversations. And they begged me, one day you've got to tie into the conversation an interview of Rabbi Adam Mintz explaining his position on conversion. So here we are. In Genesis 36 is an innocuous reference to Timna. And it comes in the middle of one of these rambling generational lists of this one begot this one and this one begot this one. And it says, Timna was a concubine of Esau's son Eliphaz. She bore Amalek to Eliphaz. Those were the descendants of Esau's wife Ada. And the Talmud in Sanhedrin 99b recounts that there was once a very evil king of Israel named Manasseh. And he was explaining why he rejected the Torah. And as prime evidence of the irrelevance and the lack of import that he gave to the Torah, he quoted our verse and the list of genealogy that he said had absolutely no meaning at all. And the rabbis came back and they said, actually, there's a hell of a lot of meaning to this text. And they taught, based on this one innocuous text, a whole midrashic story. And the midrashic story says as follows, that Timna sought to convert. She came before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they did not accept her. She went and became a concubine of Eliphaz, son of Esau, and said, it is preferable that I will be a maidservant for this nation and not be a noble woman for another nation. So this princess took a non-linear type of marriage. She married into the Jewish people she so much wanted to join us. And ultimately, of course, those of you who are in tune to Jewish history, listen to that word Amalek, and you know that he is the nemesis of the Jewish people. And the rabbis learned that therefore, because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did not accept Timna as a convert, that Amalek was the punishment. He emerged from her and afflicted the Jewish people. And what is the reason? Because the Jewish people were punished by Amalek due to the fact that they should not have rejected her. So here you have it, Rabbi. We are commanded to accept the convert, and if we don't, we do it at risk of creating a terrible nemesis. And I assume you can make the converse argument and saying that if we do, we have the potential of having an amazing generation and addition conversion to our people. So now let me turn to you and ask you to give us a sense of your journey into what you are now doing, which is really converting so many people. Describe what your journey was and what you're doing at this time.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's a great story, the Timna story. We'll come back to that. And I'll tell you that I began my rabbinic career really as the assistant rabbi in KJ to Rabbi Haskell Lookstein. And Rabbi Haskell Lookstein, the rabbi of KJ and the founder of, or the principal of Ramaz, he was very forward-looking in terms of his attitude towards the entire Jewish people. And he understood, even back in the early 1990s, that conversion was something that really needed to be addressed. Generally, Orthodox rabbis didn't address conversions. In the 1990s, we were still living in a generation where there weren't that many Orthodox Jews who married people whom they wanted to convert. So it wasn't something that happened all the time, but it did happen. And in KJ, they had something called the Beginner's Service, which was started by George Rohr. And actually, the Beginner's Service was a service for people who didn't have background. And the Beginner's Service turned out to attract not only people who were exploring a path to conversion, but also people who were exploring a path to conversion. That was a good introductory kind of service for them. So I learned from Rabbi Lookstein really the importance of conversion, and I would study with the convert, and then Rabbi Lookstein would lead the conversion bet din that we would have at the mikvah on the Upper West Side. And I continued that kind of on and off over the years. I was a rabbi in Lincoln Square Synagogue. They had less conversion, interestingly, for whatever reason. But then when I went and founded my own shul, Kehilat Re'im Ahuvim, for a reason that I can't exactly put my finger on, other than the fact that Orthodoxy does not have a good conversion, kind of official conversion program, people were seeking out ways to explore Judaism and potentially to convert. And I began to convert people, first slowly, and then over time, and then for whatever reason over COVID, the number of conversions really exploded. So what did I do this week? This week I didn't do much because next Tuesday, we're converting 17 people. And that's a pretty amazing thing. That means that 17 people who studied, and I'm going to tell you a story just to kind of put it all in perspective. It's something that happened just today. 17 people who studied, who came to Judaism, whatever it is, they are going to come to the mikveh. Why do I say whatever it is? Today, I was actually riding in an Uber to a wedding. And someone texted me, and then I called them up. It was a woman who was born in Soviet Russia. And she left in 1989. She was 4 years old. She came here. She's an MD. She's an ophthalmologist. And she called me because now that she's considering getting married, she said that she always grew up as Jewish. And so much so, she actually, they came to the United States, she went to a Jewish school in Los Angeles, a conservative day school in Los Angeles. But she became to realize over time that her mother's mother, her grandmother, which is the side that matters, that there was no record about whether or not she was Jewish. Part of the issue in Russia is that that they didn't have proper documentation. And she's concerned that, that she'll have a problem, but most importantly, their children someday would have a problem because they can't prove that their maternal side is completely Jewish. So she wanted to convert. Now, here's a woman who grew up Jewish. She's always thought she was Jewish. She practices Judaism. She observes Shabbos. She goes to a conservative shul. She is part of the Jewish community. But there's a little technicality that she grew up in Russia. So on Tuesday, she's joining the group that's going to convert. And that's like an amazing thing that, that here this woman, this morning I didn't know her. She got my name from someone else I converted. But there are story after story after story of different kinds of situations of people who, who want to join the Jewish people, who really are part of the Jewish people. There are so many different kinds of stories. And I believe that we need to be welcoming in the Orthodox community. I mean, that's really for another discussion. But I think that, within each denomination, there are certain, requirements about what it means to become part of the Jewish community. But once you become part of the but once people express that desire, I think we need to be much more welcoming to converts than has been the tradition over the generations. Very much in the spirit of that medrash about Timna.
Amazing. So when I told you the subject matter, I knew that you gave the Tikkun Leil Shavuot class at the JCC, and I do want to hear maybe a little bit later what you're doing at the JCC of Manhattan. But I asked you for your source sheet, and you have a source sheet, Is It Good for the Jews? Conversion. And in it, you quote a Rabbi Eliezer Melamed. And I went ahead and Googled him, and there's an amazing article, and I implore all of you who are interested in the subject, in the source sheet on Sephira that I've linked to our clubhouse, there are many amazing sources that all relate to the issues that we're going to be discussing. But in it was a translation of an article written by this Eliezer Melamed, who looks as Hasidic and religious and Haredi a Jew as you'd ever want to see. And it's called the lenient opinion of conversion. So I mentioned that in our intro, and I said you were a practitioner of same. So maybe you can sketch out for us what the basic requirements are, and then where there is an opportunity to be lenient, assuming that you agree with the term.
Good. So I do, and I think this is a very important discussion. So someone who wants to convert to Judaism needs to go to the mikvah, and for a male, they need to be circumcised. Now, many people in the Western world, many men, are circumcised already. So then they just need a ceremonial, just taking a little drop of blood. But those two things are requirements, and that's why we do the conversions always at the mikvah. In addition, the Talmud says, they need to accept Judaism. And the question is what that means to accept Judaism. So the traditional Orthodox view has always been, and this is one of the sources on the source sheet that you sent around, says that converts are problematic. They're like a scab, right? They just kind of, they fester. And because they don't really accept Judaism, they kind of accept it only halfway, and that's a serious problem. But I don't believe that that's so. I think what the Talmud means is that you only accept people for conversion who are willing to embrace Judaism. And people embrace Judaism in different ways. And the journey of Judaism is something that people embrace in different ways. And I want to give people the opportunity to become Jewish as long as they're willing to participate in the journey of Judaism. I think we're all part of that journey, right? Anybody who tells you they're not on a journey, that's a big problem. Every Jew needs to be on a journey.
Absolutely. So I think it's safe to say that where the wiggle room is in that third requirement. The mikveh, that's easy anyway. It's purifying. It's a rebirth. The circumcision is our branding, our sign. But it's the acceptance of the commandments, correct me if I'm wrong, where you really have something that's open to interpretation. And even the text that you quoted that compares converts to a tzoras, to a blemish, there are explanations that say because they take it too seriously. That's one explanation.
There are 7 different explanations of what that means, what the blemish means. And basically half of them say a blemish is bad and half of them say a blemish is good. So whatever you want that line to say, you can find someone who explains it that way.
So to me, I looked at the Hebrew and it says chozrin b'shvil davar, that converts are difficult for the Jewish people to bear as a leprous blemish. And then the English translation is, for for most converts convert for an ulterior motive. Bishvil davar, because of something. And one of the things that I was always brought up as kind of being beyond question is that you can't convert for an ulterior motive. And of course, the most important, the most typical ulterior motive is a couple falls in love. And one of them is Jewish and the other isn't. And they decide that they want to have a house where the children are raised in one culture, one religion. There's love there. All of those different things could be construed as ulterior motives. But the Talmud doesn't say, and therefore they're not converts. It says every convert converts for an ulterior motive. So the truth is, it is almost baked in that we're not expecting some person to come who's walking on the road and has a vision and desire, an epiphany, and converts to Judaism for no reason other than the sublime. I think that's fascinating, a fascinating diuk, a fascinating insight into Bishvil Davar, that everybody has got a reason for joining our people, and there's nothing wrong with that reason.
There's nothing wrong with it. I'll even go further than that. I can just tell you that it's the people who have an ulterior motive, the people who are in relationships or who have families already. Those are the conversions that tend to be, more committed to Judaism. Because if you have an ulterior motive, if you have a family, if you have a partner, whatever the case may be, that just makes it better. Now, it is ironic, and any rabbi who deals in conversion will tell you that what often happens is you have somebody who, is kind of marginally traditional, and their partner is going through a conversion process. What often happens is the partner who's going through the conversion process ends up more Jewishly traditional than the Jewish partner, because they spent a year studying and all those things and they get excited about it. So they tend to make the Jewish partner even more religious. So, having an ulterior motive actually works in a very interesting kind of way these days.
Absolutely. And then the truth is, like everything else in Judaism, the more you look at the sources, the more you see that it's all there. In other words, there is a very famous source in Yevamot 47b, which says that when you see that a convert, he comes in front of the judges who say to him, "What did you see that motivated you to come to convert?" And they inform him of some of the lenient mitzvot and some of the stringent mitzvot. What is the reason to say this to him? So that if he is going to withdraw from the process, let him withdraw already at this stage. So the way this Talmud translated to me in my youth was this myth of tell him 3 times to go away. Push them away and make it sound like this is the worst religion to join. What it's really saying here is, in a very kind of subtle way, you want him to be self-qualifying. You give him a sense of some of the smaller mitzvot, some of the larger one. You don't overwhelm him with 613, but that's all that it really says. And then the convert shall join himself with them and shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And this gets to something that I think is fascinating. The punchline is the mitzvot are one thing, but the real sense of conversion is joining our people. Are these 2 different pathways that we have somehow focused on keeping the commandments and less focused on what Ruth, the ultimate convert, says, which she never said anything about keeping the commandments. She says, wherever you go, I will go. Your God is my God.
So the truth is that it really depends, like a lot of things in life, what your perspective is before you start. If you want to accept a convert or converts generally, then the model for accepting the converts is what Ruth said, your people are my people and your God is my God. If your tendency is to be afraid of converts, and that tendency is a kind of old-fashioned tendency, which says that orthodoxy is fine where it is. Orthodoxy has enough people. And what we would rather is quality over quantity. I would rather have a fewer number of really solidly Orthodox people than a lot of people who are kind of wishy-washy about their Orthodoxy. Now, that sounds kind of silly, especially you and I. We were brought up by Rabbi Riskin. I mean, Rabbi Riskin would almost would either laugh or be angry at that description that quality over quantity. Of course, that's not true. That's not what we believe. We believe that we want as many people to be Jewish, who want to be Jewish. We're not. You see, we're not a proselytizing religion. This is it's a little bit of a nuance, but it's an important point to make. We don't go out and look for people to convert. These people come to us, and that's of course true. I never ever send out an email and say, if you want to convert, here we go. We join the Jewish people. We're the ones. We're the chosen ones. I would never do that. But people come to you. The question is, are you embracing or do you push them away? So the traditional Orthodox view has been to push them away. I'm telling you that this is kind of not so well known, but I work in this, and I can tell you that within the more right wing Orthodox world, slowly there is a need for conversion. And you're not surprised to hear that. You have plenty of very Orthodox people who have jobs, in the financial world, in the legal world, in the medical world, in every field, in the computer world, every field. And they're going to meet people who aren't Jewish. That's just what happens. And sometimes it's going to lead to a relationship that needs a conversion. I believe that 20 years from now, every family is going to somehow be connected to a conversion.
If we're not already. I mean, how many Jews coming out of Egypt had blue eyes and freckles? Right. That's what I want to know.
What Sharon would say is that I'm not really being fair because I say 20 years, but I don't really believe that. What I really believe is 5 years from now, every family will have a connection to a conversion. And that's probably right, because if you assume that we're converting, let's say, so this month, December, we will have converted 25 people. So that's about 300 people for the year. We're not taking it from the year of 2022. We're taking it from September to September because kind of the conversion classes work from holiday to holiday. So that's about 300 people convert. Now, 300 people, let's assume that most of those people have a partner. Let's assume that of those 300 people, 200 of the people have a partner. And that means that they'll have a partner and they'll have a family. So all of a sudden, let's imagine, again, just making things up, just making up data because it's easy to do that, right? You have someone who converts, who marries a Jew. They have 2 children. So all of a sudden, from those 300 people who convert, between 2022 and 2023, you now have four members of a Jewish family, and so that's already 800 people, and then take it from there and see what the numbers are going to be over the course of time. Everybody's going to be connected to a convert.
So we started by talking about this concept, this traditional phrase that says that converts are like a leprosy. And the Talmud goes on to say, here's the prime example, the sin of the golden calf. They worshipped an idol because they had accepted idol worshippers, whether it was the Erev Rav, this mixed multitude, or simply other converts. And one of the sources that I bring is by Shai Cohen, who talks about the origins of conversion and multilingual support. And he writes, the foreign woman who married an Israelite husband was supposed to leave her gods in her father's house. But even if she did not, it never occurred to anyone to argue that her children were not Israelites. Since the idea of conversion to Judaism did not yet exist, it never occurred to anyone to demand that the foreign woman undergo some ritual to indicate her acceptance. And that just brought me back to last week's Parsha, when Rachel brought the household gods, the teraphim of her father. Here we have a prime example of Jacob going to the land of Amor and bringing this beautiful wife with him that became a role model, a beacon for the Jewish people. But she might have had a little Christmas tree in the back of the closet type of thing. His point is that the rabbis understood that when you take somebody from a totally different tradition, as well-meaning as they are, there's always going to be a little bit of baggage, but that was never disqualifying. And that too is baked into that that statement that says that converts have that baggage. They have a little bit of a scab, but it doesn't say they're not converts. So it really is very understanding that we all come with our baggage. And I think the way we started with Timna said that maybe that baggage is good. The potential for, and there are the rabbis who take our lesson that we started with, that said because we did not accept Timna, she created a Malik. They flip it on its head and they said, and therefore when we do take in a convert, they might have a little residue, but their children and their grandchildren might be the next Onkelos, might be the next translator who can translate the Torah for a new generation of Jews.
So that is something that we haven't discussed yet. And that is, what do converts bring to our community? That's something that the sociologists are just beginning to think about. But think about it, right? Have people from different backgrounds. It creates a really rich kind of, Jewish community. The rabbi of Central Synagogue, Rabbi Angela Buchdal, I don't know exactly what her story is. She's half Korean, is that correct? Is she a convert? Her mother's a convert? Whatever the case may be, there is conversion in that family. And look what she brings. She's, it turns out she was America's rabbi, right? She was the rabbi who the guy from Texas called, when they were taken hostage. But she's an extremely important rabbi. She leads hundreds, if not thousands of congregants in Central Synagogue in New York. And she comes from a Korean family. So it's interesting to consider what they bring to the table, which is exactly your point about who the next Onkelos is going to be.
And it's not as though so many times when we look at our tradition as moderns, as children of the 22nd century, we have to really say, are we projecting or are we not projecting? Was it there? Was it not there? But I believe if you look at the sources, if you look at the early sources, obviously there was a very small gene pool. So besides not marrying the Canaanites, there had to be intermarriage. But there are so many tribes, the Kutim and the others that joined. It's just full of these stories. But in the Talmud itself, it goes out of its way to really show that this discussion, the lenient or the stringent approach to conversion, lived in the school of Shammai, in the school of Hillel. The famous story in the tractate of Shabbat 31a, where a non-Jew comes to Shammai and he says, convert me on condition that I only believe in the written law, not in the oral law. And Shammai scolded him and cast him out with reprimand. He came to Hillel, gave the same condition, and Hillel accepted him and started teaching him the Torah, Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Daled. And obviously, when they got to actually reading the text, and it came to a law such as the mezuzah, and Hillel says, so what do? You write it on the doorpost, or do you write it on a scroll? And the convert says, well, how do you know? He says, well, that's where tradition comes in. And then, of course, the more famous story is where another convert comes to Shammai, and he says, teach me the Torah al regel echat, on one foot. And you could say he was almost mocking Judaism. And that's certainly the way Shammai took it. But Hillel took it in a totally different way, and he took it as a challenge. And he gave him back a perush, an interpretation of love thy neighbor as thyself. He said, don't do unto others what you wouldn't want done to you. And the rest is commentary. It makes us stronger. It makes us more insightful and more profound when we are exposed to other traditions, at least in the house of Hillel.
Yeah, well, those stories are more about, Hillel versus Shammai. They use conversion as an example of it, but it shows that Hillel was the embracer while Shammai pushed people away. And, and of course, that's an important point when it comes to conversion, and it's an important point when it comes to a lot of things. But I think that model of Hillel and that model of Timna, or the lesson that you get from Timna, I think that has to really be our approach. One of the sources that you included on the source sheet was a discussion they had in the 1800s in Germany. In Germany, the assimilation rate, the intermarriage rate was very high because Jews had become citizens for the first time. They were exposed to the outside, to the German world. Obviously, it was long before the Holocaust, long before the Nazis. And the Jews wanted to become Germans. They wanted to intermarry with Germans. And what you had situations where Jewish men were married to non-Jewish women. So the children were not Jewish. But the fathers wanted the boys circumcised. And they went to the rabbis and they asked, can we have the boys circumcised? That's an interesting question because the boys aren't Jewish. And there were some rabbis, and I quote those rabbis there, Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer, but there were others, who said, yes, you should circumcise the boys because give them a chance. Who knows what it'll be if they're not circumcised at birth. So the idea of circumcision when you're an adult is very difficult, and people are not going to want to do that. But if you circumcise them at birth, so then there's a chance maybe they'll come around. That was such a modern view that he took in the middle of in the 1840s. Can you imagine that? I mean, today they would argue about whether that view is acceptable or not. And Rabbi Kalischer was willing to accept that view in 1840, which is really an amazing thing.
And it really speaks to this sense of Timna. You never know, as Shlomo Karlbach used to say. You never know what happens when you plant a seed. You never know when you plant a tree. And I think that ultimately is also part of this question of being able to accept converts. You're able to accept a future that you might not know totally what's going to happen. I mean, I think at the end of the day, to me, the real discussion is not between so much leniency and stringency as much as it is between status and identity. So many of us, and you can maybe put this into Shammai's mouth, he wasn't interested in converting in the sense of changing something, moving forward. He was interested in identifying. He was interested in determining, is this someone who will get the status or not? And I think more and more of who we are today is identity. And that, in a sense, is very much in line with all of these conversations that we come in the Talmud that have less to do with accepting all 613 commandments, but identifying with a people. When I went to Cuba on a JDC trip, I was amazed because it was a communist country. They were very sensitive about proselytizing, about using religion to trying to bring people in. Community was very big. There was the Catholic community and the Jewish community. So if somebody went on that road to Tarshish and had an epiphany, they would not accept them. But if someone fell in love with a member of the community and wanted to join it, that was actually the only appropriate way to convert. And I think that kind of identified the real paradigm shift that we need to make in terms of what conversion is. It's people that want to identify with the Jewish people. And boy, we need as many people who want to identify with us and help us identify and grow ourselves, I think.
I think you're 100% right. It's really, thank you so much for identifying that midrash about Timna and to have this conversation about conversion. It really, Geoffrey, has been a conversation that's been waiting to happen because we've kind of talked around it so many times. It's nice to really talk about it. And obviously this is just the first step. Maybe we'll be able to find a medrash somewhere else that will be able to take it to the next level. So thanks for bringing this up. Thanks for everybody for joining us as always. Enjoy the Parshat Vayishlach. Have a Shabbat Shalom. And next week we move on with Parshat Vayeshev. Be well, everybody.
And normally, Rabbi, I thank you for being part of Madlik, but today I thank you for being you and for doing what you're doing on the ground and making the Jewish people richer for it. So Chazak v'yamatz, thank you all for being a part of the Madlik community. If you listen to us a podcast, share it, give it a star or two, write a nice comment. See you all next Shabbat. Okay, everybody, Shabbat Shalom, and look forward to seeing you all next week.